If you are also not completely satisfied with your Korean, then this video is for you. Hello, and welcome to another very special episode of A Glass with Billy. I am here with...
Hyunwoo, this is not Hyunwoo. I was so focused on the glass
the glass with Billy, but there's a cup and a tumbler.
I'm going to call this cup Hyunwoo from now on. Okay. I'm Hyunwoo from Talk to Me in Korean, and we're actually in the Talk to Me in Korean studio, and Billy is in Korea.
I am so happy to finally be in Korea after over 2 years now. And today we have an interesting topic, why you need to feel good about your Korean learning.
Because if you don't feel good about your Korean learning, you will stop learning, and you and I will both lose our jobs. You've been learning and teaching Korean for a long time.
Right,
and
yes.
I have a similar relationship with English, and I'm sure some of the things that I've gone through, you have gone through the same things.
Right.
And you definitely came through various stages where you were satisfied with your progress, and then you were not satisfied anymore.
Right.
And learners are bound to go through those stages.
You start off at the beginning, you learn 3 words and you're like, wow, this is great. And then you learn 2 more words and you're like, why can't I speak Korean yet?
Yeah, and now, how satisfied are you with your Korean?
Honestly, I am not satisfied. I am still always learning Korean, and who knows, maybe that'll change again.
Yeah, I mean, that's great, I think, in that you are not satisfied. And I think I actually encourage my friends who are like advanced to stay unsatisfied. Because if you're advanced and not satisfied, it only helps. You can already function in that language. But when it's a beginner learner who is not satisfied,
it's a different story.
It's a different story, it's a problem.
That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. So if you are also not completely satisfied with your Korean, then this video is for you. Most learners, though, they don't have that much time for studying. They're busy.
Yeah, and a lot of people wish they could have the whole day, every day to learn a new language, but even if they did, even when they do, it's extremely hard.
It's hard to sit down and...
It's okay to have not enough time.
And then on top of that, most people aren't trying to learn Korean to be completely fluent. You know, they don't want to be a translator, but still, everyone needs to feel good about where they're at.
When you are a beginner learner, it's bound to be difficult because you have to switch up the word order in a sentence, and it's just, there's so many new things that you didn't expect before. I want to express this complex idea, but my vocabulary level is here. You're bound to feel some discrepancy, and if you focus too much on that, you can't progress further. So just focus on what you know, what you have already, and be excited. That's how I do it. Whenever I learn one new word in one new language, I'm just so thankful that I know this word. Of course, I wish I could know words surrounding that expression. Like, how about this? Like, if I learned how to say, I like Billy, how about, honestly, I don't really like Billy. Like, how about how
you don't need to learn that type of stuff.
How do I go from this lie to this truth? Even if you don't go from this simple sentence to a more complex sentence, you know this, and that means a lot. With all the social media posts where people are showing off their study progress and study notes, it's often easy to forget that everybody's struggling.
Even me, I consider myself, pretty good at Korean, but there are still some times where I feel like, oh, what would be a better expression for this? But when you're a beginner, I think you notice that a lot more, because you can't even say something like, I want to drink water or something like that if you don't know the word water. But with that said, we do have some tips for how you can stay positive about your learning experience.
Okay, here are some reminders for you.
Keeping positive about your studying is one of the keys for success that I've seen in a lot of people who do speak Korean at a high level. People who are confident and satisfied with their learning are going to typically be the ones that will learn faster. They're less worried about the things that they're missing in the language and more focused on what they already have.
And I think there's a balance to be found. You do the same thing with your courses and video lessons and your books. We do the same thing. I've done that from the beginning. It's very important for an instructor to give this positive, welcoming sort of vibe. Hey, congratulations on your decision
Right.
to learn. You got this, you can do this. Just focus on this expression and just don't worry about the rest. That's one of the first things we say on our curriculum.
You're not going to find many students learning at all from a teacher who starts a lesson by saying, hey, this is going to be a really difficult subject. Most of you won't understand it.
Yeah.
One other thing to keep in mind, though, for remaining positive is that if you know the words like 감사합니다, 안녕하세요, and if you can just ask for something in a restaurant, you already know more Korean than probably most people who visit Korea. If you can introduce yourself and say 반갑습니다, well, now you know enough Korean to make Korean friends.
Of course, you can't be too delusional about your current level.
You're not fluent if you can only say 안녕하세요.
Of course, but knowing 안녕하세요, 감사합니다, 이거 얼마예요, or 여기요, simple things like that will put you in the top, whatever percentile of all the tourists who come to Korea. But be realistic about it. Like, okay, now I know 안녕하세요. How do I say like goodbye? Be curious and look for the new expressions, and you will learn one by one. So don't worry too much about what you don't know. Focus on the things that you do know and be ready to use it.
I'm seeing a theme. Focus on what you do know and not on what you don't know yet.
Yeah, like let's pick a phrase. 오늘 여기까지 오는데 몇 시간 걸렸어요?
Okay.
Something like that. Sometimes you will just hear it and think, oh, okay, I know this.
Right.
But then if you focus on what you know, you will see, oh, some people say 여기까지 오는 데, and some people say 여기까지 오는 데에. Oh, what's the difference? Okay, 대 was all along, a contraction of 대. So you will find new things.
So paying attention to what you know is not only good for helping you to stay positive, but also it's for helping you to learn new things.
And then if you want to change things a little bit and make the sentence a little more diverse, then you will have to learn new grammar points and new words.
Something to keep in mind also is that if you're studying and you have a bad day, you feel like, oh, I really learned nothing today, or I'm just like, I wasted a whole week or anything, you're not really negatively impacting your Korean as much as you might think. In my 16 years of studying Korean, I think I had a period where almost a full year I wasn't studying, like learning any sort of new Korean. Although that wasn't the most productive year of my Korean learning, it still worked out in the end, and I ended up getting back on track later on when I had an opportunity to do that. So keep in mind that not every day you're studying has to be the most productive day in the world. Maybe you're not studying an hour today, but maybe you'll do, maybe next month you'll have more time and you'll start studying a little bit more.
Every time I study, my goal is always to get something out of this study session, but it might not happen. But it's okay, because you have good days and bad days of learning. And at the same time, in relation to what we just said, you gotta understand what kind of activity can you sort of participate in or turn on to feel good instantly. Like we were talking about Japanese earlier before we started recording. So I don't get to speak Japanese more than once a year. My Japanese is still there. I haven't lost it. But if somebody threw me an opportunity to speak Japanese professionally, maybe that day I will feel terrible, right? I thought I spoke Japanese, right? But then the next day, maybe I can do something like a simple italki session, simple chat with a friend of mine from Japan, and then I can do it, right?
Yeah.
So what I need in that sort of situation is another reminder that my Japanese in this narrow area, it works.
Maybe you can't become a doctor in Korea, but you can definitely, have a conversation with a friend or order food or something.
In that aspect, whenever people ask you, okay, so you're learning Korean, how do you say this line in Korean? Don't answer that. Not every single sentence can be translated by a learner. Like you know how to have all these conversations, but you don't know any dinosaur names in that language. How many dinosaur names do you know in Korean?
In Korean, Tyrannosaurus.
So whenever people ask you, how do you say this in this language? How do you say that in that language? don't oblige. It's not necessary. Just focus on having a conversation.
Do people ask you a lot about your English?
About other languages.
Other languages.
Whenever I express interest in Spanish or French, like, oh, okay, so say this in French. I just want to hear French. And I'm like, why do I have to say that? Which is a total random expression that you just thought of. How about I talk with you in French?
I had a Russian friend, and he said whenever anyone asked him how to say anything in Russian, he would just reply, oh, they say kartushka, which I think he said means potato. But they would think, wow, it sounds so Russian.
The next time somebody asks me to say something, anything in French, I'll say, je déteste.
Je déteste.
I hate you.
Wow, French is so beautiful. And then, of course, even if you're learning Korean and you feel, not too good about your progress, keep in mind also that you are learning a language that's completely unique. Cut yourself a break. You're doing something that could be very difficult to master, and definitely at least takes a lot of time. And while doing that, try to avoid comparing yourself to other people who are learning Korean. You see a YouTuber like myself or anyone speaking in Korean and you think, wow, their Korean is so great. I could never get to that level or anything. You can never really know how that person learned the language, and you can't even know actually how well they really speak the language
exactly.
either.
Yeah, just an edited video of somebody speaking for like 10 minutes or even 20 minutes is not a good representation of their actual skills, and it doesn't really matter how well they actually speak or not. It's not you. Just think about what you didn't know before, what you do know now, and just enjoy it. Korean learners in general are in a better place compared to a lot of the English learners who are from Korea, because many of them struggle a lot because they are learning English or studying English even though they don't want to.
It's required for their job or
exactly, and that gives them a lot of stress. The majority of Korean learners that are using our materials and your materials are doing it for fun, as a hobby, for your own satisfaction. So who cares if it takes 10 years? It'll take a long time, and you're in it for a long ride, and we are here for a long time. So don't worry, don't stress too much. Whenever you are stressed about your current level, come back to this video and feel better about your Korean skills.
And then even if you don't have too much time right now, again, you don't know how things are going to be in the future. So for me, obviously, when I lived in Korea, I was practicing Korean every day. But after I came back from Korea for my first time, I suddenly didn't really have any Korean friends again, and I didn't really know what to do, so I stopped using Korean. So you might be in that situation too. Maybe right now you're busy doing school. You just don't know where you're going to be in the future. There's a good reason to keep going with it, because eventually you might have another chance to spend more time doing it.
Whenever you watch a video on like how I learned this language in like 3 months or 6 months.
Right.
It's not the whole story.
Yeah.
They learned one part of that language, kudos to them, but they're not like really where they are eventually going to be. I'm actually studying German these days, almost every day. And the book that's helping me the most turns out to be the book that Soyeon gave me 10 years ago. She wrote a little message on the first page of the book. Viel Glück, I think.
Good luck.
Good luck. And like, this will help you, blah, blah, blah. In German. I didn't understand it.
Of course you couldn't read
then.
it, yeah.
Now I do. I had a 10-year hiatus from German. And now I'm suddenly more interested. So it's okay to take a long time to learn Korean. Just keep at it.
That's pretty much all I wanted to talk about then. So yeah, basically feel good about your Korean learning, whatever your level is, however much Korean you're able to study right now. You don't know how things are going to go in the future. Any words of encouragement then to people out there who are studying and they maybe don't feel too satisfied with their Korean?
So I always like to compare language learning to breakdance. It's kind of like somebody who is always, every single day, who is going to the dance studio to practice, but once they learn a new skill, they don't do that skill anymore because it's too easy for them. They're always learning the next move. If you have some simple moves and you're good at them, use them. Why not spend time with those moves and enjoy life, and then eventually learn one more skill each week or something like that. But it's kind of like that. So don't always look at the new expressions you will have to learn. Also use the ones that you already know. Enjoy what you know. Every single time Billy posts on Instagram or Twitter, write something simple that you can write in Korean. And then the next day, you will add one more word, two more words the next day. That's good, right?
They're gonna be like replying with one word every day on my Instagram post now.
Yeah, slow progress is okay.
Keep going. You're doing great, and thanks for watching. This has been A Glass with Billy. I'm Billy. This is Hyunwoo.
Hyunwoo.
And we will see you again in the next video. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.